May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Amen. So there was some battleships doing exercises off the coast, and they'd been out for several days, and there was a storm. Chuck, you might have heard this story before. And so there was very foggy, and you really couldn't see very well. So one night the lookout yelled down to the captain that there was a light coming toward them, and the captain asked, "Is it steady or is it moving astern?" And he said, "It's steady." And that meant that they were on a collision course. And so he said, "Signal them to change their course 20 degrees. And so he did that, and the answer came back, "No, you must change your course 20 degrees. Well, the captain got all upset, and he said, "Tell them I'm a captain. I want you to change your course 20 degrees. He says, "Well, I'm a second-class seaman. You have to change your course 20 degrees. Oh boy, this really got him. So he tells the signalman to signal back, "I'm a battleship. You must change your course 20 degrees. The answer came back, "I'm a lighthouse. You have to change your course 20 degrees. You know, sometimes you think your authority is going to get you somewhere, and then reality sets in. Well, the chief priests and the elders in Jesus' day were very much about their authority. And so they thought that just by the fact of their own position in the church, that all the rules should be followed, and that everything should be as they said. And here was Jesus, and he was teaching something different, and that bothered them. And so they wanted to know by whose authority he was doing what he was doing. Well, that was the question that they asked, but that really wasn't what was going on. They didn't really care where the authority came from with Jesus. That's not really what they were asking about. They wanted to find some way to trap him, to make him look bad. And Jesus was well aware of this. He was not too shocked when they asked him about that. So he turned it around on them. And he said, "Well, I'll ask you a question. And if you can answer my question, I'll answer yours." And so he asked them the question about the baptism of John. Well, thankfully, and I think very wisely, they began to talk among themselves and argue with each other and so forth. And at the end, they said they didn't know. Well, that was probably the best thing that they could have said, that they didn't know. They were at least showing some wisdom. Well, authority comes from many, many different arenas, many ways. Like there's parental authority. Well, at least there used to be parental authority. I don't know anymore. But there's parental authority. There's authority of a uniform, for example, a police officer or someone in the military, particularly if they're wearing their insignia of officer or so forth. And their authority is conferred on them by virtue of what they do. But sometimes authority, I mean, what you wear doesn't really count. Just this morning, I was helping people crossing the street, and this man starts, honking and, being upset, and you would think that seeing a person out in vestments that it's clear what I'm trying to do, and he says, "Oh, you're not supposed to be greeting people in the sidewalk." And okay. So authority can sometimes come by your position and so forth. But what do you do with that authority? What you do with that authority brings in that second part of the gospel. Because these two sections of the gospel, although they seem like they're separate, are actually intertwined and necessary to one another. The story is, and he's still talking to the same people that asked about the authority question. The story is, the man had two sons, and he asked one of them to go and do something. The first one said, "No, I'm not going to do it," but later changed his mind and did it. And then the second son said, "Oh yes, I'll do it," but never did. So then Jesus asked the question, which one did the will of the Father? Well, the first one did. Even though he said no at first, at the end of the day, he actually did do what the Father asked. Whereas the other one said, oh, yeah, I'll do it, and then didn't. So what he's trying to convey, what Jesus is trying to convey is that you can't just talk about things like the chief priests and the elders were. They talked a lot about how people should live, what they should do, the rules they should be following. But they themselves weren't living that way. So what Jesus is saying is that your authority is only as effective as your example is, your own personal life example. That's what's the key here. At a clergy conference this past week, it was wonderful, just amazing. We were dealing with a very tricky kind of subject, multiculturalism and racism and stuff, but the presenter handled himself really, really well. And it was amazing, wonderful, fantastic. And for the first time since I've been here, all of the clergy of St. Paul's was there. So my two deacons and I were there, and it was just wonderful. Well, after the presentation on the final day, the bishop had what he calls bishop time. And so he has a chance to present ideas, subjects, issues, and so forth. And then he gives us a chance to ask him questions of whatever we want to ask. And so one of the things he was presenting is that there's this plan in the diocese to help churches that are struggling with losing members and are very, very small. Because there's some people from the bigger churches about a year ago began to complain a lot about how much we pay in our apportionment and so forth, and that goes to support some churches that perhaps aren't viable anymore. And that's always very hard. It's a very tough thing to have to deal with if you were in one of those churches that was struggling, but it had been your church, for so many years, and then you were told, well, you're not viable anymore, and so we're going to close you down. That's a very hard thing to hear. I mean, some of these churches have been around for, in the East Coast, hundreds of years, and but the other reality is that there are limited resources, and we're living in a little bit of a, tough economy right now. And so what the bishop did was this. He said, I'm going to offer and present tools and skills to help those churches that are struggling. And I'm inviting everybody in the diocese, big churches, growing churches, little churches, struggling churches, everybody is invited to participate in these workshops so that you can your church can have a chance to begin to strengthen and so forth. Well, this one young priest raised his hand and he says, Bishop, I really think that you should use the influence of your office to ask people to go. And what he was getting at was that he wanted the bishop to use his authority with those churches that likely would need the help the most but wouldn't want to go. And the bishop handled it so beautifully, because here's the thing about our bishop. He has the authority of a bishop. I mean, he's a bishop, and if you're used to the Episcopal Church or even the Roman Catholic Church, you understand the weight of a bishop in a system like ours. But he carries it lightly. He doesn't throw his weight around. He wants to do this by invitation. But here's the bottom line, though. The other reality is that if your church is small and struggling, and you don't take advantage of these skills and tools that he's offering, your church is going to continue to fail, and you will have to be closed down. But he's given a choice. He's saying you can come and take risks and make different choices than you've made in the past and do things differently, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to turn the tide, is by doing things differently. Or you can choose not to, and that's okay. But then you just have to acknowledge that your church is going to die. But the choice is yours. Well, Jesus does that same kind of invitation. Now, I'm going to ask you, what is the great commandment? You almost got there. I heard a few people say it. Love one another. And we call it the Great Commandment. But at the same time that Jesus gives us that great commandment, we know that we're born with free will. We are free to choose not to follow that great commandment. So Jesus is saying, you can do it my way. You can love and live with joy and peace. And even in the midst of struggle, you'll find a way to deal with it because I'm with you. You're never alone. I love you and I will never abandon you. And you show love to others and others will show love to you. And this is a good way to live. Or not. Or not. It's your choice. So that's what the bishop was saying. So he said to the young priest, he said, okay, I as your bishop, then he paused. I mean, just right there. He said a lot just by saying, I as your bishop, invite you. So he's doing both things. He's saying, okay, I have the authority, and with my authority, I am extending this offer. But I'm not saying you must be there. I'm inviting you. I'm inviting you. So there's an authenticity there. There's a sense of wanting to do what he asks, because there's a sense that you probably being invited into something really nice, something really good. Now, I'll give you another example of how come it's so important for us to live authentically with the authority that we each have, because we all have authority. Some of us have businesses, some of us are maybe high up in our companies, and we have people that work for us and so forth. A lot of us are parents, maybe we're teachers. All of us have authority in one way, but let me share this one example with you. When your children are little, you can pretty much make them do what you want them to do, because they're little. You tell them that you want them to come with you to the store, you just pick them up and they come with you to the store. But after a certain while, you can't make them do anything. Now, in the early years, when they're very small, if you've told them to do things and you've loved them and you've been affectionate with them and you've got their love and their respect, they're going to obey you because they want to, because they know that it works for them to obey you, because they know you've got their safety and their best interests in mind, even if they rebel a little bit about it. But if you lord it over your children and try to maintain this strict, rigid control and never explain why you're doing what you're doing and just, I said so and don't do as I do as I say and all of that. When they grow up, you're not going to be able to hold on. They're going to go and do whatever they want because that's what you showed them. So Jesus is saying in this gospel, he is saying, you have authority. Use it authentically. Authority is conveyed most effectively when people give you that authority over them. When they invite that authority over them, then it's effective. We each have a responsibility to carry our authority lightly, to treat others with love and respect, so that when the time comes that decisions do need to be made and you end up as the authority person having to make a choice for others, that there's not going to be rebellion and fear along with that choice. That there's going to be trust and compliance of their own free will. That's the God invitation. That's Jesus's way of carrying authority. And I don't know if that day that those chief priests and elders asked them the question if Jesus could have explained it to them in a way that they could have gotten it. Could they have understood what he was trying to say? Because they were so full of their version of authority, I don't know that they could have heard what he had to say. Thankfully, with the lens of time and with the experience that we have, maybe we can get that message and carry our authority with love. Carry it lightly. Don't take ourselves so seriously. Love people into agreeing with you. You can't make them do it. You can love them into it. Amen.